Today I will be focusing on roles and responsibilities in marriage. A role is a part that you play, and there are expectations for us, whatever role we find ourselves in, whether you are a friend, you are a parent, you are a spouse, you are a boss, whatever role you play, there is an expectation, and that expectation will demand something from you. A responsibility is something you are required to do as a result of a role or a job or an obligation. And one of the first things each couple will discover is that marriage is hard work. That is why marriage is not for children. If you want to marry, you have to grow up, because it is hard work. There'll be a lot of effort, a lot of time, a lot of frustration, but when it is done right, it is the most enjoyable relationship on earth. But if it is done wrong, it can be a very harassing situation here on earth. But one of the happiest places to go to anywhere in this world is a wedding. Somebody has begun this journey. It's so exciting. Everybody is dressed well at the wedding, wearing hats and all that. And then 3 years later, you wonder what happened between just married and now. One of the areas of conflict of most marriages is the area of responsibility. Who is to do what? What do you expect from me? What am I supposed to do? You're not doing your job well. You're supposed to do this. You don't do it well. And all of that, just roles and responsibilities. There are 4 main areas of responsibility that I will introduce. The first is responsibility to God, and that has to do with worship, with devotion, with obedience, and all that comes with it. Then we have responsibility to each other. Husbands and wives have responsibility to each other. The responsibility of love, it's a job. Love is a job. It's not a feeling, it's hard work. It's easy to fall in love, but difficult to stand in love. So many people just like to fall in love and roll in love. And it's hard work to walk in love, especially when your spouse is annoying you. It's hard work to walk in love. You have responsibility to each other. Love, respect is responsibility. Intimacy is responsibility. Affirmation, generosity, these are responsibilities that we have to each other. Third responsibility is to the marriage itself. To the marriage we owe responsibility to pay bills, to do chores, to put food on the table, to pay electricity bill. That's a responsibility. You have to pay your bills. It's a job. Third responsibility is to your children. If God blesses you with children, it's a huge responsibility. It complicates the whole need structure in the relationship. Children, you are responsible for their security. You're responsible to nurture them, to take care of them, to affirm them, to encourage them, to support them, to help them reach the ultimate. These are levels of responsibility. And sometimes in marriage, we are not able to manage these ones well. Sometimes our responsibility conflicts with our responsibility to each other, our children, due to our marriage. We may be doing well as a couple, but the marriage may not be doing well, because the marriage brings us into a home, and the home has to be managed. And the home is not managed in love. You have to pay bills. You have to clean the house. You have to buy furniture. That has nothing to do with love. These are responsibilities we have on. But in order to talk about the roles and responsibilities in marriage, I'm going to look at 3 areas. The first is what I call the creation order. That's the first thing we'll look at. And after that, we're going to look at the cultural reality. Every marriage occurs within a culture, and it influences roles and responsibility. And then the final level, we're going to look at expectation of marriage. So the creation order, what cultures have developed over time, and what is expected of us. And those are the 3 areas we'll look at. Then I would come to deal with the 4 levels of responsibility at the end. So let's look at the creation order. In the creation order, the male and the female are not the same. Males are not females, and females are not males. They are 2 different entities. And biological evidence available now shows convincingly that the male brain and the female brain are wired differently. And not only are their brains wired differently, they have different levels of some hormones that regulate their activities. And so, if you look at the biological makeup of male and female, you're going to find out that the males are not females and females are not males. They are not the same. So that's the difference. Right from there, at the biological level, there are differences. However, in marriage, the man and the woman become one. Now that is something else. Now, trying to merge anything that is different into one has its own complications. So you have the male different, female different, but they marry and they are one. But the fact that they are one does not mean they are the same. They are very different. For example, the way men usually solve problems is very different from the way women usually solve problems. Usually. Now I say usually because there is a marginal percentage that sometimes defy this logic. But usually, when a man is confronted with a problem, he's going to become quiet, withdrawn, not talk, brood. As people say, he goes into the cave. When a woman has problem, she's going to become talkative. So when you have a couple that are facing a financial problem in the marriage, one feels, let's talk about it. The other feels, let's think about it. Now, let's talk about it and let's think about it is not the same. So the one who is going to talk about it will disturb the one thinking about it. And the one thinking about it feels that the one talking about it doesn't even know what she's talking about. Now, when you face this dilemma, a simple thing as the raising of electricity bill and how to resolve it can create problems. Because men process information differently and women process information differently. Normally, when men are silent, their wives may think they are angry. And then when the women are talking, the men may think the women are blaming them for the problem. So the man says, I am not the government. It's not my fault. Because when women talk about problems, they talk about it as if you must solve it now. But the man cannot solve it now because he must think. And if there's nothing to think, he must still think. And when he's thinking about it, the woman will say, you are wasting time. And he says, I am not wasting time. I am thinking. But the problem is getting complex, but I have to think. So you have two entities, both trying to solve the same problem, but approaching it extremely differently. So it makes some of these roles very, very difficult to handle. So in the creation order, these two entities who are very different have now become one. And in the creation order, the husband in marriage, the husband is the initiator. Now, I am deliberately not saying the husband is the leader, because our concept of leader has undergone different interpretation. So I say the husband is the initiator. Now, the initiative of creating the family, of leading the family, of directing the family from the creation order is the responsibility of the man. Now, it doesn't necessarily mean that when you marry, by all means, go and buy a house or go and build a house. That sometimes for practical purposes, you may live with a parent. My counsel, according to the creation order, is you must leave. Now, I know that because of the economic hardships we are faced with, leaving is hard. But that is why you think before you marry. You don't fall in love and marry. You start thinking, where are we going to stay? So you think ahead, you plan ahead, and all things being equal, move. If for some practical purposes you cannot move, it has to be a very temporary arrangement. It doesn't have to become a permanent arrangement. Now, what is a temporary arrangement? 6 months to 1 year maximum. What is a permanent arrangement? 3 years. So once you're there for 3 years, it is becoming a permanent arrangement. But if for some practical purposes, temporarily, you have to move, you have to move. In the creation order, the husband is the initiator. And not only in this respect, but in the initiator in most things. Now, the concept of the initiator is like two people dancing together. Now, when two people are dancing, somebody takes the lead. One person takes the lead and the other person follows. But in the process, the one who follows takes the next lead. And then the one who led first follows. So it becomes a synchronized movement. It is not as if this person takes the lead and permanently forever he's going to take the lead. He sets in motion a process, and both the husband and wife play their role, each one leading at one point or the other, each one following at one point or the other. I hope you get it. And that's why I refuse to say the husband is the leader. He takes initiative. So marriage happens within societies. So it becomes cultural, the cultural reality. The cultural reality is that our culture affects the way we interpret roles in the marriage. If we live in a male-dominated society, we're going to see the role of the man as very dominant in marriage. If we live in a female-dominated society, we'll see the female's role getting prominent. If you were an Arab and you lived in an Arab culture, all things being equal as we understand it, you would find the male playing a more dominant role than the female. If you were in a Scandinavian country, maybe Sweden or some other place, you'll find the roles maybe changing over time, that you find women playing more leading roles and so on and so forth. So culture plays a role. In Ghana, we are slightly male-dominated. It's balancing, but depending on which part of Ghana you are, if you're in the villages, it's very male-dominated. As you come to the cities, it's balancing a little. So you find that men feel very, very positionally stronger in marriage. Now, that is not the creation order. That is culture. So many times when we want to interpret what marriage is, we have to be able to understand what creation established, what culture has developed. And our interpretation of who is head and who is leader mostly is cultural. Culture doesn't supersede the creation order, but that's the culture. You have to understand that marriage happens within a culture. So when I was younger, I used to hear when people were encouraging women to how to keep their husbands, they would say, keep yourself well, take good care of yourself and cook well, and make sure that by the time your husband comes from work, there is food on the table and you're ready to serve him his food. And that is counseling. And it's supposed to be good counsel, but it's a cultural counsel. But now, the culture is changing. So, there's nothing like you getting home and your wife preparing food, because your wife is balancing accounts. So when you get home, you prepare your food. Now, we expect that women should be able to cook, which is good. But I believe that men should also gradually now start learning to cook. You have to. Because maybe it will not be the wife putting food on the table for the husband, but the husband who puts food on the table for the wife, because things are changing. I mean, if you get home first, maybe you work somewhere that you close early, and by 4 you've closed, you get home by 6:30. By that time, your wife is still balancing accounts at Zenith Bank. And so when she comes, she's tired. She lies down on the sofa, and there is food on the table. Now, if we don't understand the cultural reality in line with the creation order, we can create a lot of frustrations in our marriage. Because the way my mother was is very different from the way my wife is. These days, a 20-year period, a 30-year, 40-year period can be a major generational change in attitudes. The way your father was is very different from the way you are. The environment they grew up in is very different. When I was growing up, I knew just a few women who went out of the home to work. Majority just stayed. Times are changing and the expectations are changing. All right. Now, let's go to the expectation. We know what the creation says. We know how culture defines it. So Submission is not a one-way line. The husbands submit to wives. Wives, submit to your own husbands. This submission is related to one person. It's not generality. So husbands ought to love their own wives as their own bodies. The principle here is, men, you cannot outsport your wife. You cannot outdress your wife. If you buy one shoe, she gets two shoes. So in the marriage, who does what? Let me answer this very, very simply. There will be many things to do in any marriage. There'll be things to do for obedience, things to do for each other, love, respect, intimacy, affirmation, generosity. There are things to do for the marriage, for the home, chores, bills to pay, and so on and so forth. Children, security, nurture. Who is supposed to do what? When couples ask this question, it is a revelation of a deeper problem. Because if they're really working it together, they would not ask who is doing what. Who is doing what doesn't come in. Who is doing what comes in when you don't consider yourself one flesh. So everybody lives their life. My money is my money, my house is my house. That's my fridge, that's my TV. Because many people are married, but they don't know how to say our. They've said my for so long. That's my fridge. That's my cupboard. That's what I brought into the marriage. If you're asking who should do what, it means you haven't gotten the unit working well. Because if the unit starts working well, between the two of you, you will find a way to make everybody play their role. So my take on this is that there are no defined roles. Who should pay the school fees? Figure it out. Although from my own personal experience, I think the man should be able to handle that. But let's face it, in this day and age, you may not have equal salary. And I know a lot of marriages where the woman earns more than the man. So the responsibilities are going to be shared. I think that if the two of them are together, they will find their own rhythm as to how these responsibilities will be accomplished. But each one must be committed to making an input. Sometimes it can be one person doing most of the things. The next time it can be another person doing most of the things. I mean, let's face it. I mean, somebody can lose their job. And for a season, one partner may be carrying a lot of the load. But when the person is carrying a lot of the load, then you who is out of job must compensate by picking up other loads and making the load of this other person lighter. Because if we don't do it that way, you are not working, somebody is picking up the load, and you're making unnecessary demands which cannot be met. That is irresponsibility. Common sense should tell you, if you're not picking this load and that person is picking a load for the two of you, something you should both be picking up is being picked by one person, show some respect and show some appreciation and go out there and help to make the person who is picking that load at that time feel a little bit more appreciated. So I'm not going to divide roles to say you pay fees, you pay rent, you do this, you do that. There are shared responsibilities. When I was growing up, parents were not involved in their children's education. There was no parent. I don't remember when my parents ever attended a school function. You know, when I was growing up, parents were not involved. But over time, I began to understand you have to get involved. Attend children's events. And for those of you who are younger, you have to get very, very involved in your children. Because it has been proven scientifically that children who have their parents involved in their lives academically perform better. Get involved. Stay with them. One of the things I tried to do was I'll sign their homework. Their mother made sure I did, so I had to be obedient. And I looked through the homework. Even if I didn't like it, I had to look through it, correct all the mistakes, and make sure that every homework was signed by me. Now, for those of you who are younger, you have to get ready for that. You're going to be part and parcel of the life of your children. You're not going to leave them alone to grow. You're going to be part. You're going to spend time with them. You're going to be there encouraging them. You're going to be there helping them to cope with peer pressure. You're going to be there. Now, who is supposed to do it? Is it husband or wife? Both of you must get involved. Both of you get involved in the teachers. Talk to the teachers of your children. Spend time with the teachers. Find out what your children are learning. Find out their output in school. Find out their problems. Sometimes the teachers know things about your children that you don't know. Get involved. And I just want to encourage all the men especially, get involved in the life of your children. There's going to be a lot of responsibility financially. You have to work hard. My take here, and when I say something is mine, I'm not forcing it on anybody. It's just something I just want to encourage you with, that every couple must ensure that they own a house. 10 years after you've married, you must own a house. I know life is hard, but when you plan well, things become a bit easier for you. If you start ahead of time, you plan, you target, and you work towards it, you will be able to achieve your dreams. Work towards it. 10 years of marriage, you must own your house. And I'm speaking within the Ghanaian context. In other countries, I would say 3 years. If I was speaking to an American, tell them maximum 3 years after you marry, own your house. Because you have all kinds of advantages in your economy that we don't have here. Here, people spend a lot of time trying to own a house. But I just want to encourage every couple, own a house 10 years after you've married. And make sure that if you're going to have children, each one of them has a house. If you have 2 children, build 2 houses. Don't leave one house for 4 children, 5 children to fight over. It will bring unnecessary quarrel amongst your children when they grow up with inheritance. Each one must have theirs. Each one must know where they are going. And whatever they want to do with, that's up to them. I didn't start with a house, so you have to work hard. But I want my children to start with a house. I want your children to start with a house, so that when they start life, at least they have a little advantage. And they can apply their finances to do greater, maybe get more than what you got. But don't let them struggle from the same basic scratch that you struggled from. We don't live life backwards, we live life forwards. If I didn't wear sandals to go to school, my children must wear sandals. And my children wear sandals, their children, I don't know what they wear, but they must wear something higher than sandals. They must drive better cars to school. You have to make sure generation after generation after generation, we are improving the life of our children. When you focus and plan ahead of time, you are able to accomplish a lot more than you can dream of. So plan. For those of you who are young couples who are trying to start your families, you have to plan ahead of time. So for those of you who are coming, you have to think ahead, because when you grow up, and that's one of the things I've come to learn as a parent, that when your children grow up, all they have memories of the past. For those of you who are going to get married, make sure that you're creating good stories. Let your children remember when you went out there and went out there and went to the beach and went to the beach. But go out with your family. Because let me guarantee you this, for those of you who are young, when your children grow up, that's what they're going to remember. When you took them somewhere, and when you spent time with them, and when you were with them, and all the stories. And that is what makes their life rich. And for you to achieve that, you have to be committed to it. There are great responsibilities ahead for every couple. It's going to be hard. There's going to be a lot of expenses. There are going to be difficulties along the way. But I can guarantee you, if you do this thing right, the best relationship you can ever have on this earth is with the person you are married to.